What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue, and today is another beta update and highlight video. This latest build came in a lot later than normal for Wednesdays, so people were anticipating a lot of sweeping changes, which if you looked at the Wowhead article that came out, you might not see too many. However, I can tell you that, especially for rogue things, there's a lot more under the hood than you might be expecting. So let's take a look at all that going on in today's video. So today's video has a few more obvious rogue changes, some covenant tuning, some profession tuning, and a whole lot of rogue bug fixing. We'll start with the rogue and covenant specific stuff and work into the slightly more generic topics and the bugs that are kind of funny to talk about. So first and foremost, we had a small bit of legendary tuning take place in this build. Specifically, the Outlaw Rogue legendary celerity has been dialed down a little bit. This legendary causes you to gain a damage boost whenever Adrenaline Rush is active, and also gives you short Adrenaline Rush procs that trigger as long as you have the Slice and Dice buff active. This previously was a 10% damage boost, but has been dropped down to 8%, so basically a 20% nerf. Honestly, even with this nerf, celerity is still simming as the best legendary of all options Outlaw has in single target and is potent in dungeon slice sims as well, so I'm not terribly surprised that this got brought down a little bit. Most of the other legendaries are generally between like 3 to maybe 6% in overall damage, and even after the celerity nerf, it should be right around 8%. Pretty simple change, but just to bring it slightly more in line with other options. And the Invigorating Shadow Dust legendary saw a buff this week as well. This is the legendary that reduces your cooldowns anytime you cast Vanish. It has gone from a 15-second cooldown recovery bonus up to 20 seconds. This is still basically the lowest simming legendary in terms of raw DPS output for all 3 specs, even with Outlaw and our cooldown reduction built in to reduce our vanishes. However, since this is from the PvP vendor, I think Blizzard is banking on this being more useful in arenas and whatnot for the extra crowd control, which it might possibly be. As an amateur PvPer, I can't say as I haven't done much testing of it on the beta, but yeah, I figured I'd let you folks know about this change as well. For rogue abilities, it might look like Shiv got a change if you were just looking at the beta builds notes, but no, it's the same. It's still a 20% bonus for 9 seconds to your nature damage as assassination only. Oh well. For Soulbind conduits, the Stiletto Staccato Subtlety conduit saw a really tiny nerf at rank 15, from 2.5 seconds down to 2.4. And then every subtlety rogue ran kicking and screaming to Blizzard because they were mad they got nerfed at the end. Nah, I'm kidding, of course. They already did that because of Akari's. Kinda a random little tuning bit, but all the other ranks increased by 1/10 of a second, so I guess they wanted the last one to increase by 1/10 of a second as well for consistency. I don't know. Quite a few of our non-DPS conduits saw some tuning this week as well, with most of them getting pretty good little buffs. Fade to Nothing was increased at rank 1 from giving a 10% movement speed bonus from 3 seconds up to 10 seconds. Nimble Fingers, the Faint and Crimson Vial cost reduction conduit, saw a teeny nerf at rank 15 from 20 energy down to 19. Oh no. Prepared for All saw a pretty sizable buff of 100%, increasing the cooldown recovery of evasion from 1 second up to 2, and interrupts reducing the cooldown recovery of Cloak of Shadows from 2 seconds up to 4. Recuperator, which caused you to heal for a percent of your max health over 36 seconds, was slightly nerfed starting at rank 3. Don't get any funny or cheesy ideas though, as you can't just slap a 1 combo point Slice and Dice out there to get healed for 36 seconds. Basically, from what I can tell from my own testing, it heals you as long as the Slice and Dice buff is active. So the 36 seconds is a bit misleading, as I can have Slice and Dice up for way longer than that, and it was healing me for the entire time. Lastly, Rushed Setup saw a nice buff across the board, but especially at the early stages. This conduit reduces the energy cost of Kidney Shot, Cheap Shot, Sap, and Distract by a minimum of 20%, going up to 48% at rank 15. Covenant Soulbinds saw quite a few changes this week too, so we'll talk about those next. And I'll start with the blue, overtuned elephant in the room, Pelagos. You know how I said if I make a video about Pelagos that same day he'll be nerfed? Yeah, well, Let Go of the Past has been tuned down a little bit, though I'm curious how much it'll actually affect the overall damage of him, at least for rogues. Basically, the versatility buff will only stack up to 4 times, resulting in a 4% versatility buff. You now only have the buff for 4 seconds though, so you'll have to hit something different once every 4 seconds to keep this buff active and to increase the percent versatility bonus. Something a bit misleading I noticed on the tooltip is that it says you need to use a spell or ability, but it has to be something that deals damage if you're a rogue, so like Crimson Vial doesn't trigger a stack of it, or Evasion, or a Grappling Hook, or things like that. The tooltip wording kind of threw me off the first time I saw it, so I figured I'd let you folks know about it too, because I figured a spell or ability is anything in my spell book, as it's called a spell book, so yeah, I don't know, maybe that's my fault. Next, we have a bit of a change to Nia's Grove Invigoration ability. Before, basically the Soulbind effect made it so you would gain stacks of a buff that would activate whenever you used the Sepsis Covenant ability. You'd gain a 1% increase to your max health as well as a mastery buff per stack for 30 seconds. The ability's buff has a 2 proc per minute rate, and Sepsis is on a minute and a half cooldown, so the old version resulted in generally not a ton of stacks at any given time. The revised version, however, allows you to proc those 1% max health and mastery buffs as you fight, and Sepsis gives you 12 of them every time you cast it. The data mined tooltip makes it seem like it should only be 8 stacks, but yeah, you get 12 of them every time you cast it, at least if you're a rogue. That might be a bug, or maybe just the data mined tooltip was weird, I don't know. Either way, you always get a big mastery buff whenever you pop Sepsis now, and if you proc any extra stacks while fighting, they can overlap. So there may be times where you end up with 13 or 14 or maybe more of the mastery and health buff for a little while. Mastery isn't exactly a super potent stat for any of the 3 specs of Rogue right now, at least in single target, but a bunch of any stat for 30 seconds is still good. So for more utilitarian changes, there was one in particular that is looking pretty potent now for free healing in a group, with Clea and her Valiant Strikes. Basically, with the changes made to it, this will give you a stacking buff for every time an ally nearby or you critically hit. This will stack up to 40 times, and if you or anyone near you falls below 50% health, it'll spend all of those stacks on them, healing 1% of their maximum health for each stack. So yeah, this can work out to be a 40% of max health heal for free when maxed out, and it doesn't seem to have an internal cooldown or anything of the sort. So pretty crazy for free healing, and I can only imagine the potential usage that this could have in a raid environment. This is of course speculation, and it's obviously a very newly revised Soulbind trait, but it could be extremely useful in raid healing if it takes into account all players in a raid group, so that would be pretty crazy if you have like 20 people critically hitting, because you get 20 stacks of this buff like every couple seconds, which would be really spicy. I don't know if that's going to stay that way or how it's going to work though. For slightly more banal changes, Eminie's Hearth Kidney Stone received a huge buff. It's a Soulbind passive that basically gives you an extra Hearthstone every 12 hours instead of every 24 hours, reduced by 5 minutes for every killing blow you make. Oh boy, I can only imagine the jokes that can be made here, though to be slightly serious, kidney stones are extremely painful, just saying. Plague Deviser Maraleth received a reduced cooldown on Kevin's Keyring, which is basically them trying to steal rogue utility from us. How dare they? This Soulbind trait allows people to open 1 Shadowlands or lower level lockbox every 12 hours, down from 24. Each second spent channeling the Fleshcraft Covenant ability reduces the cooldown by 1 hour, so for every 6 times you channel Fleshcraft, which can be done once every 2 minutes, you can open a lockbox and not pay your local rogue to do it for you. This is a huge issue for the local rogue co-ops that you could be spending time at, so please keep that in mind and remember that local rogues need more support than these damned covenants trying to swoop in with their larger benefit packages at prices we just can't compete with. Anyways, Bonesmith Airmere has what looks to be just a wording change to the Ravenous Pendant Soulbind trait, as it still heals you for 3% of your maximum health every 6 seconds, can stack up to 5 times, and adding stacks refreshes the duration. The old tooltip was a bit vague and I truly don't remember too much about this trait, but I think a lot of this is just wording changes. Runeforged Spurs received a sizable buff as a utility bonus. This makes it where your mount speed is increased by 5%, but if you're attacked while mounted, it will increase your speed by 10% for 30 seconds, up from a mere 5 seconds, so that's kinda cool. And as a quick nod to profession tuning as well, there's been a decent amount of material cost requirements changed in this build, especially for Legendaries. The cost of Ouroboreal Shards also went down by a large amount, going from 1,000 gold down to 125, although the number you need is increased on all Legendaries to offset this. These were items you bought specifically from a vendor to use in Legendary crafting. But due to this cost change, it basically works out to being less expensive to craft most Legendaries across all ranks of crafting in the game, The rest are really big discounts though, up to 50% in some cases, which is nice to see for people without gold to throw around. As an aside to leatherworking, the armor patches that they brought back with Shadowlands got severely nerfed in this build, though they were giving a really high amount of stamina for this early in the expansion. I do hope and expect Blizzard to keep bringing out armor patch kits for every tier following this one though, if they're gonna already nerf these ones to the point where they're not that consequential in the first tier of the expansion, as with this massive nerf, it's really not that big of a deal to use 4 of these. I will say the fact that these armor kits for whatever reason have a 2-hour duration, because apparently you're just like stringing them onto yourselves with like a piece of twine so they fall off after a while or something, I don't know. It's really annoying to have to deal with this many consumable buffs already to track, and then this would have been another 4. But this was like one of the few things leatherworking would have had as a low-cost, easy income type thing to make as a low-level leatherworker, so I don't know, I'm still pretty mixed on this one. Most of your cooking recipes also saw a slight decrease in material costs, which is good to see as well. Not a huge update, but something to be aware of because they're tuning even these little professions with this extra time, which is good to see. Now, I'm sure most of you at this point think this isn't a whole lot of rogue stuff in this build, and that Blizzard might be focusing too much on other classes or other parts of the game. I mean, the Wowhead article only shows a handful of rogue-specific things, so that must be all that they did on rogues, right? Well, thankfully, a wild mistler swooped in and slapped me upside the head with a whole messload of rogue bug fixes that went in with this build. This will just be a slightly redacted version of a lot of the bugs that were fixed that he sent me, but there were literally minimum like 18 of these fixes that made their way into the build. So thankfully there will be a lot less things to worry about with bugs and quirky issues going into Shadowlands as long as they don't accidentally break them again. Yep, that would never happen. So here we go. They finally made the Broadsides Roll the Bones buff and Dreadblades affect Echoing Reprimand, Sepsis, and Serrated Bone Spike for the extra combo points. Sepsis is the only one that's kind of weird because it's only getting the damage part for Broadside, but not the extra combo point like it should, so it's affecting it like kinda sort of. Otherwise, these are all finally working correctly with our latest talent options and with our buffs. They also finally made Kidney Shot's combo point expenditure affect Restless Blades as Outlaw, which it hasn't at all until this build. Another big one for Outlaw, Blade Flurry, Killing Spree, and Dreadblades will all break you out of stealth now, so you can't do like a Blade Flurry to ambush for stealth or anything like that anymore, which didn't make any sense anyways because the new Blade Flurry deals damage when you use it, so it's kind of weird it didn't take you out of stealth anyways. For Subtlety Rogues, the issue of Black Powder not automatically triggering its own Deeper Daggers damage boost is working now too, although Deeper Daggers is not quite the powerhouse of a conduit it used to be after the most recent nerf. Flagellation, the Venthyr Covenant ability, no longer applies Find Weakness when you use it as Subtlety either, unfortunately. But that was a bug in the first place, so I'm surprised it even managed to do that at all. Echoing Reprimand's initial hit also benefits from Symbols of Death, resulting in a pretty juicy critical hit, which is good to see. This, for those who didn't know yet, is the Carrion Covenant ability as a rogue. The Finality Legendary will now also affect the bonus damage of Eviscerate from rank 2 Eviscerate, which is a pretty big deal for the extra single target damage boost. For Assassination, the really random and stupid slice and dice bug where you were breaking out of stealth has finally been fixed on the beta. Ironically, this issue only came around if you were running Elaborate Planning and Subterfuge, which are 2 of the most commonly used talents for the spec. So kind of obscure, but a good fix as well, since otherwise you'd be losing a lot of extra garrotes really often. Sepsis is now entirely benefited by Shiv, including the big damage burst at the end, so that's a nice little increase in damage output as well. For slightly more generic things, there was a really OP bug where you could put on the Mark of the Master Assassin Legendary, the one that gives you the guaranteed crits, and then you could switch to a different one, allowing you to keep the 5-second guaranteed crit buff for your first pull. This was fixed finally, as that was something I found quite a while ago and have reported numerous times. Lastly, for another funny one, the Nimble Fingers conduit also now correctly reduces the cost of Feint in Crimson Vial, instead of increasing the cost. Yeah, kind of a silly bug, but that was a thing too. So yeah, that is only about half of the bugs fixed in this build, so it does show that they are definitely getting in some of the reports that we've put in and fixing them instead of letting them slip through the cracks, which is honestly great to see, especially since they did take this extra time to put the expansion together. So at least I know at least some of that time wasn't an entire waste. And there you have it, folks. These are some of the bigger, more noteworthy things that I felt might affect us sneaky boys a little more than other things that came out in this latest beta build. There were, of course, more bug changes than I mentioned. Like I said, there was like at least 18 or 19 of them, but we went over like 10 or 11 today. So you can tell that they are actually taking this extra time to try and polish and finish things up that we've been mentioning to them over the last few months, which is good to see. I hope this video was helpful to you, and if so, any likes, comments, or new subscribers are fantastic ways of showing your support for the channel. If you're new around to my little corner of the YouTube algorithm, then I'd like to welcome you to come check out the rest of the channel. I do new uploads every weekday on a variety of content, ranging from things like beta news updates to guides, add-ons, weak auras, and of course, plenty of rogue-specific stuff. I'd also like to take this time to thank all of my regular viewers, commenters, subscribers, and especially my patrons, who all help make these Shiba Shenanigans possible. Thank you all so much for watching. This was the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.